Another Steam sale, another handful of games added to my endless collection. Like most of you, I drag around an oversized Steam library with only a handful of games actually getting real playtime. While it has a few single-player titles I've completed, the rest of these sale pickups kinda just stare me down while rotting away in the tab I cleverly named games I need to finish. But what if they didn't? What if I stopped booting up Total War 3 every time I had a free second? What if I didn't drop into Helldivers every time a new major order dropped? What if I actually finished these games? Among the endless abyss of that games I need to finish tab is about a dozen boomer shooters I picked up during a few sales. Luckily, the RNG gods picked one I've been meaning to play. Forgive Me Father. A relatively standard entry into the boomer shooter genre, Forgive Me Father holds its inspirations pretty close, with some clever uses of its Lovecraftian heritage to spice up a standard boom shoot. When it comes to boomer shooters, there's been such a gold rush that each one kind of needs its own knack visually or gameplay wise. You've got boomer shooter but medieval, boomer shooter but Russian, classical, gay, and in this case Lovecraftian. It does a pretty good job implementing that into its art style, with plenty of tentacles, fish, amalgamations of flesh, and it takes place in bumfuck Massachusetts. Visually, it's similar to Darkest Dungeon, using the same high contrast, heavily shadowed sprites to obscure some of the indescribable designs Lovecraft's writing leans on. Realism in this kind of setting can be more than a bit jarring, so the style picked is infinitely more important than how it's executed, and well, honestly, they nailed it in both regards. The heavy-handed turquoise and deep-sea blue that gets ever-present the more you exceed the normality of Pestisville. The hardline shadows barely tracing out the corners of whatever eldritch abomination is running at you, with the faint hints of torchlight keeping you on your toes from what hides in shadows between trees. The style is perfect for the setting, and executed even better. It's only really let down by the game's weird sanity lighting system. I'll touch on sanity more when I talk about gameplay, but for the most part, the game has a very vibrant color palette, but can slip into grayscale at really inconvenient times. Many of the arenas are well made, with really beautiful skyboxes and some clever environmental storytelling, using dense fog, destructible props, interwoven with gameplay elements like monster closets and trapdoors, bundled in with detailed overall set dressing. But some of the areas can be a bit run-of-the-mill. Don't get me wrong, it's incredibly well crafted. Like, yeah, you're gonna be in a swamp, but it's an incredibly detailed swamp, with soft torch lighting, fitting frog ambience, waterlogged bungalows, and a massacred campsite. If you ventured anywhere near this kind of setting, you already know where you'll be fighting. But that's not inherently a bad thing. I'm not expecting the colors beyond time to slip in during the talking stage, and while the game does feature some Lovecraftian touches in those early chapters, as you progress through the story, you unlock more and more of the Eldritch grab bag. When it gets proper Lovecraftian weird, it gets the best kind of weird, but for the most part, you've seen a lot of these zip codes before. The lighting, though, is downright gorgeous. It's kind of striking for a game like this, with one moment a shootout through non-Euclidean architecture, and the next you're staring at a pretty light reflection. I had moments pulling out my lantern or some of the weirder Steam future punk weapons, and was kind of shocked at how good they actually looked in the environments. That's not to say the game doesn't look good. Of course, on a technical aspect, everything from the enemy sprites to the weapons all have a lot of love and detail put into them, especially when they get weird. Of course, weapon-wise, you've got the standard double-barrel Tommy gun, oddly boxy plasma gun, but then you get different upgrade paths like a fish shotgun. Each of the weapons also sound good. Your shotgun's punchy impact matches the damage it deals. The revolver sounds heavy and follows each shot with a satisfying click of a new round. Even the weird ones scratch that integral uber cool itch. The music, though, just like a lot of the general setting, is formulaic. It's your standard rock affair that makes blowing up horrors beyond comprehension fun, but I couldn't really name a standout time where I thought, damn, this is good. Beside for one or two that play in the last chapter. Okay, it's about time we touched on gameplay. In so little words, it's Doom with a tentacle coat of paint. Yeah, that's definitely being very melodramatic, but it holds its predecessors close, and unlike some of its contemporaries, Forgive Me Father doesn't feel the need to conform itself to a unique gameplay element. There's no plasma gun to blow up walls or magical pimp glove to slap style into people. Move fast, kill squid, dodge projectile, get colored key for colored door, hit the crescendo room, and kite around until everything is dead. There's absolutely zero wrong with this, and if anything, it executes this loop perfectly. Now, unfortunately, there's no sequence breaking like you can do in Dusk, but there's also not a ridiculous amount of backtracking until you get to the later chapters. We'll talk about that later. While the area's design can be formulaic, the combat fits it perfectly and rarely feels dull. The gunplay is actively engaging, as you can't solo a room with any single weapon since ammo can be sparse without precision. While you do need to use the most of your weapons, the gunplay is nowhere near the ADHD weapon swapping fiesta that Ultrakill and Doom Eternal turn into. But there are better weapons for specific scenarios, though the maxed out shotgun just kind of solves everything. You do lack a bit of long-range weaponry, so to compensate, most enemies will try to close the gap to you, or be placed in nearby nooks. With the lack of hit scanners, any liquidators who sneak in corners and monster closets are still punishing without being bullshit. Of course, it can heavily depend on the difficulty and character you pick, with the lower skills being incredibly forgiving. I played on hard and thought the game was a bit easy, so if you've tried some of these before, I'd play an expert with the caveat that the difficulty really ratchets up. Once I hit the latter chapters, my deaths really started adding up with all the new projectile enemies. Nothing like some of the Ikaruga-esque bullet hell bullshit that other games can pull, but still a lot. I know I said Forgive Me Father didn't exactly change the recipe, but it does add a handful of unique spices. Yeah, the enemies and weapons are relatively standard among the genre with a detailed Eldritch coat of paint, but you do get a lantern button. It lights up some of the darker areas and can have a pretty unique fuck this factor, lighting up horrors beyond comprehension and watching your sanity meter drain. Or rise. To be honest, I really don't understand this thing. The game is normally in color, but witnessing enough abominations or killing enough enemies and your sanity bar increases, slowly turning the world into grayscale, only highlighting blood and some hidden details. This is fine for the most part. It's annoying in some of the low light areas, but fine. However, you can manage your sanity by picking up alcohol items. But the alcohol raises your sanity, putting you back into grayscale, similarly to being in combat with an abomination. I guess I just don't get it. Beside that, you do get a skill tree, letting you spec into specific weapons, skills, or character traits with a little bit of flavor text. This is where you can turn your double barrel into a fish gun or plasma gun into worms.
Told me how to make a weapon that would help us against our enemies. And here's the thing, it's made of worms. It even fires worms.
Both characters share basically the same story, with deviations exclusively to their skills and playstyles. The game says the journalist is for a more aggressive playstyle and the priest is more defensive, but in actuality I just think the priest is easier. Plenty of late game encounters and especially boss fights get cheesed by the priest. Let's compare here. 300 health, never use this one, invincibility, and infinite ammo. The journalist gets a fat blunt of sage with a magic sword combo that gives her some health when she kills with it. With no surprises though, the gunplay and combat are fantastic, with plenty of variety in both arenas, enemies, and weapons. The game of course holds some secret areas and a secret power-up Lewis gun, but lacks any secret levels. After every mission finish, you'll get an end screen to cap off how much you were able to complete, with specific counters for enemies, barrels, secrets, and story pickups. I guess it's about time to touch on the story, so if you'd like to pick it up, skip to here. The story, just like most of the game, is pretty formulaic for the genre. There are a few slight differences whether you're playing the journalist or the priest, though regardless, you're the cousin of Lewis, who's a concerned resident and pseudo-detective of Pestisville, your hometown. The multiple disappearances and cult activities make him reach out to you. The intro cutscene spells this all out, but doesn't really differ much, even reusing the same desk for both playable characters. The game also never specifies why you specifically can help, but regardless, you set off back home and don't find your cousin at the meeting point. You fight through the town, learning of specific town residents and an everything company named Blue Squid. But you still beeline it to the local asylum where a doctor points you to the city outskirts. This is where most of the townspeople and your cousin were taken by the strange cult. Running through the outskirts and one of the most annoying boss fights in the game, you find out they hung your cousin, and the big bad man cult leader is Mayor Benjamin Mahoney, who had his re-election posters plastered all over town. Get through the swamplands and onto an Eldritch corrupted boat, and that even the narrator specifies is a weirdly bad idea. It's clear at this point that the main character is slowly but surely losing touch with their sanity, and maybe even influenced by Cthulhu. Eventually hunting down the mayor and his cultists, executing them coldly, but revenge isn't enough, and using the key that Asylum Doctor gave them, they unlock the gate to arguably the visually coolest levels in the entire game. Welcome to the terrifying lands beyond comprehension. Where are you? No clue, but the mix of nebulas, voids, writhing flesh, and medieval structures is perfect. The areas also have these really weird enemies that I couldn't accurately describe if I wanted to. You have to get through some of the most tedious areas the game has to offer with a god-awful amount of backtracking, but luckily lacking any resurrecting enemies. You eventually take a boat to a secluded island to fight Cthulhu, turning him into writhing Gibbs. Dude, Look, we all saw this coming a mile away, but that doesn't make it any less bullshit. I get it. Random priest or journalist influenced by the power of great old ones to commit acts of violence. Like, I see the vision. You start out fighting nameless zombies with no weapons, civilians, and progressively you get more and more liquidators modeled after cops who try and slow you down. You chase down the survivors outside in the city outskirts, hunting down the mayor, and in the last act you fully lost it, being completely detached from reality. I do have a minor discrepancy on when you've actually become influenced. Like, are you fucked from the moment you receive the letter or the second you go to the hotel? Is your cousin really your cousin because some of the notes say he was meeting up with his uncle? Is the mayor really evil? Because as far as I know, he went missing not too long ago. Then there's the weird Weyland-Yutani Every company who had a cargo ship mutinied and then had cult rituals performed on board, but they still landed and buried their dead? What about the secret laboratory under the processing plant with monsters kept in back-to-tank stasis? But in the last chapter, you get a flashback office that has some kind of cultist robes, maybe hinting at you one time being in the cult. Maybe if it didn't pull the "you went insane and killed everyone" trick, I might be able to pull something out of this, but since I have no clue what's real and what's influenced by eldritch beings, I don't know what's a red herring or what actually happened. As far as I've been able to interpret, Pestisville was already weird and cultist infested like Innsmouth, affecting the people there and extending out to the coast. You can blame all the cursed waters on the sunken ruins. But regardless, if I was to take a guess, the first handful of acts is a mix between influenced and real. Some of the areas were truly corrupted, but you cured more than the cultist with your double barrel. I'm of the mind that your character, whether that was the journalist or the priest, were in the cult at some point in their youth, but escaped, and that's why you're more susceptible to the mental corruption. How much of the last few chapters is real is up for debate, but regardless, the zones look pretty cool. Look, I was expecting a formulaic story, and I got one, but there are hints of a really interesting, deeper story that I wish wasn't so vague and purposely designed for a 20-minute story explained video going specifically in depth on each of the story pickups. That is one of the primary cons of the game. I get that most boomer shooter titles aren't meant to be story masterpieces, but this was an attempt at making an impactful story that ended up neither being a bad story told well or a good story told poorly. It's just kind of a story that has been written about in a handful of Lovecraft novels, then forcefully shoved down your throat in the end. The final two chapters are by far some of the best visually in the game. You get weird hints of sunken cities, more tentacle abominations, but also some of the most needless backtracking in the entire game. I get it, blue key for blue door is in that yellow room, but I need the yellow key to get into that room, so I fight through the blank room to get the red key for the red room, which has the yellow key and stop. I don't know if it was padding, but when I had run through the earlier chapters, everything had flowed incredibly smoothly. Was it basically a straight shot from the beginning to end with a few survival arenas in the way? Yeah. And I understand that this is standard for these kinds of games, but Jesus fucking Christ, I didn't know Unknown Kadath required me to understand non-Euclidean geometry in real time so I wouldn't get lost. At a certain point, this isn't some backtracking or looping areas together. It's padding, and it really takes away from the downright beautiful arenas that are what I was after the whole time. You also have to deal with more platforming sections, and while the game feels pretty tight in terms of movement, your jumps can feel kind of weightless, and while it doesn't matter too much in gameplay, the game really isn't without its flaws, but what it does well, it does perfectly. A Lovecraftian boomer shooter is a stellar idea, and while other games have tried it in the past with slight hints here and there, this is the primary one in memory that is a purely Lovecraftian shooter in style and substance. There is more content on offer with New Game Plus, which gives you a chance to run through with some really busted loadouts, and the Endless Survival mode can provide some extra gameplay if you're pining for it. Overall, I did enjoy my time with it, but I still have some reservations that can't easily be solved. I will recommend it though, to fans of Lovecraft who want to see a vaguely recreated Innsmouth and Dreamlands, but for any retro shooter fans, wait for the sales to roll in. That's really about it.